411 Live.
Where you can learn about issues that impact us every day. State of world, 411 Live.
Real people, real talk.
Made to help people in our community in every way. Boy, your girl, 411 Live.
Imagine life is really going well. You're outgoing, you have a good job, you have money in the bank, you're traveling, you have lots of friends. Life is really good. And then you have a stroke. You're in the hospital. You can't talk. Memory is gone. What now? Hello, everyone. I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. This scenario happened to my guest, former journalist Vivian King, and now the author of the book, When the Words Suddenly Stopped, Finding My Voice Again After a Massive Stroke. Vivian, welcome.
Beverly, thank you. Thank you so much for even wanting to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I read the book. I loved the book. It flowed. You know how you can say, this is a really easy read. It was an easy read because it kept me engaged. You did a really good job with this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, I was thinking about when we met, and I go back to October of 1997 or 98, because it was when I was interviewing for the job at Fox 6.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a, what do you call it, a club suite or whatever at the Bradley Center. And
Yes.
we went to a Bucks game. It was you, me, Janet Roach. Remember Janet?
Yes.
Angie Zulu, who was a photographer at the time at Fox 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you were just a pleasure. You were fun. We had a good time. And of course, I took the job.
Yes, we were like, yes, you should come. You should come. And you did. And what a wonderful thing. And the work that you have done has just been awesome. And so you are a Milwaukee treasure.
When I took the job, it was a 3-year contract. And I said, I'm just passing through. And gosh, I was, there 21 years.
Beverly, I said the same thing when I got here in 1995. I signed a 3-year contract and I said, okay, I'm going to be here for 3 years and then I'm moving on to bigger and better things. God clearly had other plans for both of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we are going to reminisce a little bit more later, but I really want to talk about this book because, like I said, it's really a good book. I'm really, really proud of you. When the Words Suddenly Stopped, Finding My Voice Again After a Massive Stroke. Putting this together, it seems like you had to put your journalist hat on and get all these different perspectives in order to tell this story, right?
Absolutely. Because I wrote the first chapter 5 years to the day of my stroke.
Wow.
And I wrote that first chapter, me waking up, me lamenting that I had to go to a Girl Scouts breakfast, not because I disliked the Girl Scouts, but it was a Friday morning. It had been a rough week. And so I said, I have to go to the Girl Scouts breakfast. And then I said, I should call and cancel. And I thought, no, my friend Sadna, who you know well, because she was in journalism as well, she had invited me weeks before that. And so I said, I have to get up and go. And boy, am I glad I did, because I got up. And in hindsight, and we can talk about that later, I think I was having the stroke on the way to the Girl Scouts breakfast. But I wrote that chapter. And then I got to, part 2, getting to the breakfast. And I thought, I do not know what happened at the breakfast. And I said, I have to go back to my old ways of journalism and asking each person what happened. So I started with Sadna because she was the one who introduced me or who invited me to the Girl Scouts breakfast. And so we sat down for lunch and I just put the recorder on and we just talked about that day. And we realized at that point that that was the first day that we had ever spoken about that day. And so the things she told me, that I was foaming at the mouth when this happened, which shocked me. And I thought,
wow.
what? And then she was telling me other people who were reacting to me at the breakfast. And that's when I found out Janine Edwards, a good friend of mine, was actually at my table. I remembered running into Janine in the beginning as I was walking in, but I didn't remember that she was actually at my table. And then I had several sorority sisters and several other friends there. And so Sadhana unlocked that door to maybe you should talk to this person and maybe you should talk to that person. And so it just became this puzzle that I had to bring all of these different pieces together. And really, just like we did day in and day out as we covered the news, we pulled these interviews together. And that's what revealed the whole story to me. So I didn't even find out about my whole journey until this was done.
Wow. So let's go back and let's talk about this stroke happened in 2000, what?
2013, October 25th, 2013.
Okay. Did you feel, because you were saying you probably started as you were driving to the place. Did you feel different? What, was anything off?
I did not feel different. I, jumped up, I took a shower, said, okay, I'm going to this breakfast, grabbed my keys, didn't put my makeup on, which is not unusual because sometimes if I'm in a hurry, gotta be someplace early, I will do it in the car at stoplights, as I say in the book, at stoplights, not driving down the street. But if I don't finish on the way, then definitely when I get to my destination, I will finish up there. Well, to me, clearly, I had just not thought about that at all. Once I got to the Hyatt, which is where we had the Girl Scouts breakfast, I parked and I did not even think of putting on my makeup at that point. I got out of the car, walked into the hotel, walked into the dining room, told them that I was a guest of Sadhana, and they were showing me to my table. And that's when people were coming up and saying hi to me. And in hindsight, as you hear from their stories, they thought that I wasn't myself, that I wasn't greeting them as I normally would, because, I knew many of them. People were hugging me, people were saying hi. And normally I would greet them with a certain enthusiasm. And that is what they weren't seeing. And so that's why when I got to the table, and Sadhana kind of jokes a little bit, and I had remembered that part from my side of the story. Mm-hmm. And then, she kind of echoed that, which was really funny to me. But they told me, oh, are you feeling okay? And I was thinking I felt okay. And they said, maybe you need something to eat. And clearly I wasn't necessarily responding, sure, I feel fine. They said, well, maybe get something to eat. They got me something to eat. I took a bite of sausage. And as I say in the book, that's the last thing I clearly remember for 10 days because I had a seizure. I collapsed right there at the Girl Scouts breakfast. They called the paramedics. And in the book, they feel like it took forever when it probably was only about 5 to 10 minutes because they were pretty close. Mm-hmm. But they say when you're there and you're going through it, it seems like it was taking forever. And they rushed me to Sinai, and I was there for about an hour when the doctor said, let's rush her to St. Luke's, which specializes in stroke care. And I was in neurological ICU for 10 days and then in the hospital for a total of 32 days, rehab for those last 20 days, 22 days to get me ready so I can come home.
Wow. So you're in the hospital for those 10 days. Are you conscious or not?
I'm conscious sometimes, and then sometimes I'm not. Okay. And so, There's a part in the book where I remember my mom coming in. I remember my pastor and his wife coming in. I don't necessarily remember everything that they said at that point because I was really in and out.
Yeah.
I had several, from what I later found out, several MRIs, probably about 20, because they might have done it twice a day to see how my brain was functioning, because they had to watch the swelling. They had to make sure, I had a neurosurgeon on standby just in case it swelled too much that they had to do surgery. And thank God they didn't have to do that. And so I remember the speech therapist coming in. I remember my sorority sisters asking me questions, doing flashcards. I'm in and out. I remember my friend and sorority sister Kim Montgomery coming, and she was by herself. And I remember her bringing a card. And so she gave me the card, and I remember looking at it, as we talked about, as we had our interview together, it's interesting because as they remembered their parts, then that kind of jogged my memory a bit. And I remembered, yes, that did happen. And so she recognized right away that I was not responding because she knew I couldn't talk, and she recognized that could possibly be a stroke because her father had a stroke and couldn't talk for a little bit. And so she remembered how they had to talk to him. And so she just talked to me regular, and she said, "Would you like me to read the card?" And I said, "Sure." I nodded, I think. And she read the card, and it was a Michelle Obama card. And it said, something about Michelle Obama wants you to get better and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so, she knew that I liked the Obamas, and so that I would enjoy that. And then there was another card from her sister, and so she read that as well. And she just talked, and she said that it was really a period of time before my friend said, "Okay, nobody can come visit me anymore," because the doctors had said too many people coming in will exercise her brain in the wrong way.
Overstimulate.
Overstimulate it, exactly.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to overstimulate my brain and have me trying to figure out who somebody is if they weren't somebody close to me or somebody that I don't see on a regular basis. They didn't want my brain to have to overwork.
Right.
And so that's why there was a complete shutdown. My pastor on 2 occasions, 2 Sundays in a row, told the congregants in our congregation that she's in the hospital. Just pray for her. No visitors, absolutely no visitors. We know you want to visit her, but we will keep you updated. Her brain needs to heal.
Right.
And so a lot of people were really kind of, I have good friends. I've lived different places, and when you live different places and you're day in and day out with somebody, I have some really good friends that I hung out with and still talk to today. And they were like, "We can't come visit."
Right.
So it's funny.
Yeah. You talk about in the book, you call it the 3 Ps, which I love the phrasing of that. Posse, which you're talking about, those friends that had to step in and say, "Okay, nobody else comes. She needs to heal." And so they're taking care of you. They're your gatekeepers. And then you talk about persistence, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then you talked about prayer. And all those things played a pivotal role in your recovery. But we are kind of at our halfway point, and I want to talk about that whole recovery and that rehabilitation. So before we start, let's take a break, and we'll come back and we will continue our conversation. I'm talking to Vivian King. She is the author of a new book talking about her stroke and the experience, so stay with us. You're listening to the 411 Live.
you could be spreading the coronavirus without realizing you have it. So follow guidance from authorities where you live and do your part. It's important to limit in-person interaction with anyone outside of your immediate household, but phone and video chat are safe ways to connect. It's also important to limit any social gathering. This advice applies to people of any age, including teens and younger adults. Visit coronavirus.gov for the latest information.
And welcome back to the 411 Live. I am talking to my friend, former journalist Vivian King, who has written a book taking us through the journey of her stroke experience and the aftermath. Let's talk about that whole rehabilitation because, one point when I was reading the book and I went, oh, and that is when you talked about you went to the bathroom, you were brushing your teeth. You did that fine. And then the toothpaste was in your mouth and you didn't know what to do next.
Right.
I was just, oh my gosh.
I know. That was, it was interesting because every day I would have physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. And occupational therapy, is just really getting you back to doing the things that you normally do.
Yeah.
Washing, showering, so they had to help me shower that day, my therapist. And then, we got cleaned up and then, and they had to take me to kind of like one of those areas, like a dorm room, like a community shower, because I had to sit and she had to help me wash because at this time my arm wasn't as mobile, if you will. And so then we got back, I'm all dressed and then she's like, okay, time to brush your teeth. And she does that. And, and I was doing fine. And like you said, I stopped and then she says, Vivian, you have to spit it out. You have to spit. And I thought to myself, oh, okay. And I spit. And then I thought to myself, I should probably know how to do that because I must have done that once before. And so it was just really, really very strange. And at that time, my friend June had come in because she would come in the mornings. And she had arrived. She was in my room when we came back from my showering and getting dressed. And so the therapist said, we just have to, have her wash her face and brush her teeth. And then so she heard that and she thought, this is not good. And, it just kind of, I had to put that in there because people don't realize, and I didn't realize I haven't been in the hospital. I mean, I had one procedure done, but I haven't been in the hospital. So this was really kind of my first intimate connection with a hospital. And, I was telling some friends of mine that it made me appreciate the job that I was in at that time because I was vice president of community relations. But I had a cursory knowledge of hospitals and care. And so this was really, in a weird sort of a way, kind of preparing me for the job that I was already in. And so, giving me an innate knowledge, if you will. My caregivers just do such an amazing job and they are thankless sometimes. They do a thankless job. We have to remember to thank them.
Yeah.
So many of them on the front lines now, with COVID-19.
Absolutely.
They are at risk, but they are servants at heart and thank God for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we talked about the posse and thank God for your friends who are, they were stellar. They were there for you. So there's your posse. And then with the rehabilitation, I mean, talking about being told to spit,
right.
That persistence that you had to have during that rehabilitation. Man, just getting back to normal. Were you ever afraid, or were you thinking, I'm going to master this?
I wasn't afraid because everybody around me was so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have enough memory of my prior life to realize that this is odd. I used to talk for a living and now I can't talk. My brain wasn't there. My brain never said, oh, I need to get back to normal. It was really a step by step. And every time I couldn't do something that they asked me to do, especially in speech therapy, I said, okay, I probably should know, I was like, I thought I probably should know this. And they could probably tell from my face that, my face changed. And then they would always say, that's okay, we'll try something else. They were always very positive. And so I wasn't afraid. I just was thinking, okay, the next time she asked me that, I want to be able to do it. So for instance, every day I would get up, get dressed, I would eat before I ever went to therapy. And so my first session was in the rehab area, and you have a lot of therapists there and a lot of patients. And so you go to this kind of central area in this big room, and then you wait for your therapist to call you. And so my therapist would always say, whoever had me first would say, good morning, Vivian, how are you doing today? And I would smile, and they would say, what did you eat for breakfast today? And I would have just eaten, Beverly. And I could see what I had just eaten, but I could not say the words or remember the words, or it was just so crazy to me. And so every day I was just like, if I can just tell them what I had for breakfast, I just had it. And then they'd say, that's okay. My mother would say, she had such and such. Oh, that sounds good. Well, let's get you to your first therapy session. And I just was like, I need to persist and really be able to answer them tomorrow. Right. And so, I would try to do one thing at a time. And finally, I remember when I at first they had to wheel me to therapy because my right side was weak. But towards the end, and this was when I kind of started talking, they were late. The transporter was late. And so I said, come on, Mom. So we started walking down the hall, and we met him on the way. And he says, what are you trying to do? Take my job away? And I said, well, we thought you were late, so we thought we'd just start. And so, each day, once I started therapy, I was really trying to answer the questions and do it better the next day. And so that's, I think, where that persistence came from.
Yeah. And thank goodness for those caregivers, because when you couldn't tell them what you had to eat, they didn't give you the perception that they were alarmed about it.
Right.
They were just, that's okay. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
They were awesome. They were awesome.
Now, let's talk about the cause, because this is a shocker for some people, some women. What did you find out as far as the reason for this stroke?
So I did not find out the cause until discharge day. So, 32 days later, I find out the cause because my doctor was telling me what I needed to do, etc. And I asked him, because I was dating someone at the time, somebody I thought I was going to marry. And I asked him, what about my birth control pills? And he said, no, you can't use those anymore. And I said, what? He says, that's what we believe caused your stroke. And so I asked my mother, do you know this? Did you know this? Yes. And then I'm thinking, oh no, now my father knows I'm on birth control pills. And so does Daddy know?
The secret is out. Okay.
Here I am 49 years later, right? 49 years old. And so the bottom line is birth control pills, especially over the age of 40, can cause blood clots. And birth control pills cause the blood clot in my brain over the left side, on the left side of my brain, over the part that manages your speech, which is why I couldn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't really realize that the estrogen in the birth control pill can be a problem. Smoking, if I smoked, that would have been even worse. There are so many other conditions. However, over the age of 40 is really a risk. And when I talked to some of my friends, one said, oh yes, my doctor told me in my mid 30s, we're taking you off birth control pills. And she said, why? Because I don't want you to have a stroke. But this is not a regular dialogue because, and yes, I have done other talks and, people have said, oh, well, I knew that. Well, good for you. But half the women that I talked to did not know. And the other half are like, yes, I knew, but this is not widely talked about. And I don't think that all healthcare workers really believe that sometimes, because in 2014, which is, less than a year after I had my stroke, I spoke for the Go Red luncheon for the American Heart Association. And I, in my capacity as VP of Community Relations, filled the table. And there was an emergency room nurse from our hospital that said after the talk, I don't believe that birth control pills caused it. And I said, well, you did not examine me and you were not with me for 32 days in the hospital. Wow. And I'm going to believe my doctors that cared for me at that time. And so, because of that conversation, there's so much information. I happen to, a friend of mine has, my cousin has a podcast, and I was listening to it the other day, and he had an OBGYN, and they were actually talking about opioids, but she's an OBGYN as well. And they were asking for questions, and I asked, can you talk about the link between birth control pills and blood clots and stroke? And so she says, yes, it's the estrogen. And she says, so what I do is if somebody is over 40, you can get a progesterone only type of birth control, which I was sharing that with another friend of mine in the book who was still taking birth control pills. And she says, I just told her that yesterday. And she said, I never even heard that. So there's so much information that is not out there about birth control and what it can do to our bodies. Now, birth control pills do a lot of great things, but there are some risks that we need to talk about. And that's another reason I really wanted to write this book, to start that dialogue so that we can have as much information as we could so that we can protect our bodies.
Absolutely. I mean, you may be saving lives just by doing this. For women who were still on the pill and they're 45, 49, and just didn't know. So now they know. The last thing, because we're almost out of time, I talked about the posse, the wonderful friends that you have, and your persistence in the rehab and everything, because you are back to normal. There are no residuals here. And let's talk about that last element, and that's prayer.
So many people prayed for me, not just my family, but then, I'm pretty active on Facebook. And so a lot of people found out that something was wrong because I wasn't posting on Facebook. And then people were saying they were at the Girl Scouts breakfast and we need to pray for Vivian. Mm-hmm. And so many people prayed for me. So I was just blown away at how many of my Facebook friends pray. And we never talked about it, right? And so why don't we talk about that in public? It just never comes up, right? And so I had so many people praying for me, close to me. People had their Sunday school classes and their churches and their prayer circles praying for me. I just was astounded. And what was even more astounding is that on discharge day, I had 3 different caregivers who had either been transferred or, one was a nurse from the ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And one was my therapist my occupational therapist who said, who told me, you got to spit, Vivian. and then another one. And they came independently during that day while we were waiting, for the discharge papers and the, official word.
Right.
And they each said, we're so glad that you're leaving the hospital. Would you mind if we prayed? And me and my mother were like, we don't mind at all. In fact, we welcome it. And we prayed 3 different times with these caregivers because they asked us to pray. And so that's when, you're in a clinical setting and it's embedded with science, but you still have people there who believe in God and who feel that prayer is important. And I just thought that all of that together, my posse, my persistence, my prayer, on top of the excellent medical, the medical breakthroughs and the everything that the doctors did, all of that just converged. And that's why I'm here today.
Wow. Well, I have to say, I was in that number praying for you, and I believe that God is the source and he has and uses resources. And that's your hospital and, all those other people who came beside you in your life in this situation. I truly believe that.
I truly believe that too. And I truly believe that he said, you are not going to stay in this apartment. You are going to get up and go to that Girl Scouts breakfast because you don't want to let your friends sodden it down. And that started the whole ball rolling. That is why I am here today. And I believe he did that for me because he knows I have a big mouth. And I like to share the good things of my life and share the trials and to triumph. And I would tell this story and give him the glory because I could not do anything for myself. And Absolutely. So I had to rely on him and the people that he put in my life.
Well, I am so glad that he blessed you in a mighty way because I'm so glad that you are healed and you're here to talk to us today. It's been a pleasure, Vivian. It really, really has.
Thanks, Beverly. I appreciate you.
That is Vivian L. King, and she is the author of When the Words Suddenly Stopped, Finding My Voice Again After a Massive Stroke. Thanks, Vivian. Love you.
Love you too.
All right. And thank you for joining us for another episode of the 411 Live. Real people, real talk. If you would like to know more about this podcast, please go to our website, the411live.org. You can also become a sponsor, and you can also see past episodes as well as any podcast platform that you like, and of course on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, be sure to subscribe as well. So until next time, I'm Beverly Taylor, and this is the 411 Live.